Hey guys, tonight we wander into a medieval town under a sky that can't decide whether to drizzle politely or dump buckets on your head. Your boots are soaked, your cloak smells like wet sheep, and you're praying the mud on your hem is just mud. The cobblestones are slick, the market stalls shuttered, and every shadow feels like it's whispering about you, because, frankly, it probably is. Strangers stick out here like a sore thumb, and a sore thumb was usually treated with leeches. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes finally catch a swinging wooden sign, a crude painted tankard creaking on rusty hinges. This is no royal inn with feather beds and roasted peacocks. It's a tavern, the kind of place where you'll find weak ale, stale bread, and at least one man who wants to know far too much about your business. You push through puddles, passing a pack of pigs that clearly own this alley. Somewhere behind you, someone spits and mutters. Not a great review. The doorframe leans like it's been drinking, but it still does its job, keeping out most of the wind and about half of the rain. The smell inside is warm and heavy, wood smoke, sweat, and something fried that was probably once food. This is where villagers swap gossip faster than coins, where a single rumor about crop failures can make a landlord sweat more than tax collectors. Mainstream fact: taverns were often the only place travelers could reliably find food, drink, and news. But here's a quirky tidbit: some doubled as makeshift post offices, with letters left under mugs or nailed behind the bar. Historians still argue whether these taverns strengthened communities by spreading information, or tore them apart by spreading lies. Right now, though, all you care about is drying your socks and hoping no one notices you counting your last 3 pennies. Doorways and danger. A crooked beam and creaky latch welcome strangers, but hint at trouble lurking inside. You duck under the crooked beam, narrowly missing the splinter that seems determined to scalp every traveler taller than a goose. The latch clatters shut behind you, not because you closed it, but because the wind likes to play tricks. Inside, eyes swivel toward you like owls scenting prey. Not hostile exactly, but curious in that "do you belong here, or should we check your pockets?" kind of way. The tavern's floorboards sag in sympathy with every footstep, and the ceiling smokes more than the hearth. A single candle drips wax from a beam, making you wonder if gravity worked differently in the Middle Ages, or if this ceiling is simply plotting your demise. You keep your shoulders low, trying to blend in, though your travel cloak screams outsider louder than a cat tied to a church bell. At the door, a bench full of men with mud-caked boots give you a look. Not unfriendly, but measuring, like a butcher deciding whether a chicken is worth plucking. You nod back, the universal gesture for "I'm not here to start trouble, but I might finish it if needed." Quirky historical tidbit: doorways were more than thresholds, they were checkpoints. Some taverns kept tallies of strangers who passed through in case someone skipped town owing money. And yes, historians still argue whether these records were about public safety or just creative bookkeeping. The innkeeper appears, wiping a cup with a rag so filthy it might actually make the cup dirtier. He gives a thin smile, the sort that says, "Yes, I'll serve you, but I'll also remember your face if anything goes missing." Doorways like this didn't just welcome travelers, they filtered them. Merchants came through expecting a deal, pilgrims expecting charity, and soldiers expecting everyone to move out of their way. As you edge toward the counter, you notice the doorframe again. It's hacked with little notches, maybe counting patrons, maybe marking something less wholesome, like how many bar fights the place has survived. One fact remains steady: medieval taverns were both havens and hazards. You never knew whether stepping inside meant a warm meal or waking up outside with lighter pockets. Right now, though, you hope this doorway's only trick is its ale before questions. You order the weakest brew just to avoid suspicion while locals size you up. You decide the best way to look like you belong is to buy a drink before anyone asks questions you don't want to answer. Elbowing through the crowd, you reach the counter, really just a plank balanced on barrels, and signal for ale. Not the strong stuff that could strip varnish from a cartwheel. No, you ask for the weakest brew, the kind even children sipped at breakfast because medieval water was about as trustworthy as a tax collector claiming to just want to chat. The innkeeper eyes your coins with the precision of a jeweler weighing gold, then eyes you with even more suspicion. He pours the ale slowly, as if expecting you to bolt before paying. The cup is rough wood, warm from too many hands, and smells faintly of smoke, onions, and something medicinal that might cure you or kill you. 50-50 odds. You take a sip. It's sour, thin, and barely alcoholic, but you nod appreciatively. Showing disgust would mark you as soft. This is how you signal. I'm one of you, even if you're clearly not. Around you, locals are watching, farmers, shepherds, maybe a tanner judging by the smell of his boots. One raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Where are you from, stranger?" You give the smallest shrug, the medieval version of just passing through, nothing to see here. Mainstream fact. Ale really was safer than water in many towns, since boiling during brewing killed some of the nastier microbes. Quirky tidbit. Some taverns used the same yeast batch for months, producing flavors so unpredictable that even the brewer couldn't tell if you get mild refreshment or mild hallucinations. Historians still argue whether weak ale was a deliberate health choice or simply the cheapest way to stretch grain supplies. The noise in the room softens a notch, not friendly but curious tolerance. Your cup's empty faster than you'd like, but you hold it with casual confidence, pretending you've done this 100 times. Congratulations, you've successfully bought yourself a little anonymity. In this place, ale is less about quenching thirst and more about buying silence. Fireside gossip, crackling logs, and whispered deals reveal how a tavern doubled as medieval newsfeed. The fire pops in the corner, sending sparks up a chimney so crooked it probably leaks more smoke into the room than out of it. You edge closer, not for warmth, though you're chilled to the bone, but because this is where information lives. Every tavern hearth is part rumor mill, part confessional, and part medieval market research center. Two men in patched cloaks huddle on a bench, murmuring about a lord's grain tax. A woman with arms like a blacksmith's leans against the wall, loudly recounting how some neighbor's pig allegedly ate a child's shoe. Whether the child was still in it is conveniently unclear. You keep your face blank, but your ears are busy. This is where you learn who's hearing, who's cheating, and which roads aren't safe. The room smells like wet wool, wood smoke, and roasted something. You hope it's mutton, though given the squealing outside, it might be tonight's unlucky piglet. In a corner, a man with only 3 teeth offers advice to anyone who will listen. Don't trust millers, don't trust priests, and above all, never trust anyone who says, "Trust me." Mainstream fact. Taverns often acted as informal message boards. Before printed newspapers, gossip by the fire was how villagers heard about royal decrees or distant wars. Quirky tidbit. Some innkeepers spiced up news with outright fabrications to keep customers talking and drinking. Historians still argue whether taverns genuinely spread reliable information or simply stirred up paranoia. A minstrel plucks a lute string, testing if anyone will pay him to play or throw him out first. One farmer complains about crop blight while betting on which neighbor's roof will collapse next winter. Someone near the door mentions bandits 2 villages over. Whether true or not, every whisper carries weight. You sip slowly, keeping your expression somewhere between bored and vaguely sympathetic. Tables, tallow, and thieves, sticky wood, smoky air, and the occasional missing purse keep you alert. The bench you claim near the hearth is sticky enough to trap a small dog, and the table in front of you leans at an angle that dares your cup to slide off. Candles gutter in iron holders, dripping tallow across the wood. The air is heavy, not just with smoke but with the sour perfume of too many unwashed travelers pressed into one room. Somewhere in the back, a door bangs shut. Either someone left or the tavern ghosts are tired of the draft. You keep a hand near your pouch. Medieval taverns weren't exactly known for their strict security policy, unless you count the innkeeper's watchful eye and the occasional dog that barked at thieves after they'd stolen something. A man at the next table tells a joke about a bishop and a donkey, and everyone laughs, too loudly, the way people do when they're also checking who's listening. Mainstream fact: taverns were often inspected for short measures and watered-down ale, though most innkeepers cheerfully ignored such rules. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found coin hoards buried beneath old tavern floors, likely stashed by patrons who never returned to claim them. Historians still argue whether these places were centers of honest community trade or just dens of petty crime disguised by cheerful drinking songs. A merchant argues over his bill, swearing the bread is smaller than last week. The innkeeper swears back, claiming the merchant's stomach is just bigger. Someone bumps your shoulder, not hard enough to start trouble, but just enough to check whether your pouch jingles. You adjust it calmly, like you haven't noticed. You take another sip. The ale's still sour, but at least it stays in the cup, unlike the stew someone just spilled behind you. A curse follows, then laughter, then the sound of someone counting missing coins. In this place, sticky tables and bread harder than steel. You gnaw at supper while wondering if the cook has ever met salt. Your stomach growls loud enough to compete with the loot in the corner, so you order supper, or at least something pretending to be supper. The innkeeper returns with a plate of bread so hard it could double as building material, a lump of cheese shiny with age, and a bowl of stew whose ingredients refuse to introduce themselves. You knock the bread against the table for fun. It makes a sound like a carpenter testing oak beams. You gnaw carefully, hopping your teeth are stronger than the loaf. The cheese tastes of smoke, earth, and faintly of the cellar floor where it was probably aged, or dropped. You sip the stew and decide not to ask whether that's mutton or yesterday's mystery meat with new seasoning. Everyone else eats without complaint. This is what passes for normal. Mainstream fact: medieval tavern meals were often plain and heavily dependent on local harvests. If grain was scarce, bread was coarse and small, and meat often rare. Quirky tidbit: some travelers carried their own salt because tavern food was famously bland, and hosts charged extra for seasoning. Historians still argue whether this reflected deliberate frugality or simply poor cooking skills preserved by tradition. Nearby, a carter jokes that his horse eats better than he does. Someone laughs so hard they spray crumbs, instantly improving the stew's texture if not its flavor. You chew slowly, pretending you don't miss fresh fruit or a decent knife to cut the crust. A child, maybe the innkeeper's, scurries by with a tray of bowls, each one scraped almost clean before it reaches the next customer. Waste nothing, even flavor. The bread dulls your hunger but not your awareness. You notice which men keep glancing at the door, who guards their mugs too closely, and who never seems to eat at all. In a medieval tavern, a bad meal isn't the worst thing on the table, it's just the most. Minstrels, dice, and debt. Entertainment comes cheap until you lose your last coin to loaded bones. The lute finally strikes up a tune, a jaunty rhythm that promises to lift spirits, or at least distract patrons from how bad the bread was. A minstrel sings about a miller's daughter and a fox, though half the lyrics seem improvised. You drop a coin in his cup. Better to have music than to endure the silence that usually means someone's about to draw a knife. Soon dice clatter across nearby tables. Men crouch over them like cats over a mouse hole, voices low and urgent. Someone wins loudly, someone else loses louder, and you catch the glint of a blade tucked under a sleeve. You know better than to play, but the temptation is real. A few coppers could double your purse, or empty it entirely. Mainstream fact: gambling was as common in taverns as drinking, despite repeated bans by church and crown. Quirky tidbit: some dice from medieval sites were deliberately weighted, carved with off-center pips so subtly crooked they'd fool even a sober player. Historians still argue whether gaming was a harmless pastime or a breeding ground for feuds and debts that turned violent. You watch a shepherd swear his dice are blessed, while his opponent swears they're cursed. A merchant shakes his head, already calculating who'll owe whom by dawn. The minstrel switches to a sad tune about a sailor who gambled away his boots and had to walk home barefoot through snow. The locals cheer at the chorus. You suspect they've all met that sailor. A man nudges you, friendly on the surface, but his eyes are doing math. Your clothes, your boots, your purse. You decline politely, pretending you're terrible at games, though it's not much of a lie. In here, luck doesn't come from saints or stars. It comes from knowing when to sit back, drink slowly, and let someone else lose first. Sleeping in flea company. Beds are optional, straw pallets aren't free of tiny roommates. Eventually, the dice go quiet, the minstrel packs up his loot, and the tavern grows sleepy, or at least less awake. You think about finding a bed, then remember this isn't an inn with feather mattresses and scented pillows. Here, bed usually means a pile of straw in the loft, already warm from whoever lay there last. And by warm, you suspect it's not all body heat. You pay the innkeeper a few coins for lodging. He points you toward a ladder that looks more like firewood with ambitions. At the top, the sleeping space is one big room, lined with pallets. Some are already occupied by snoring figures who smell of sweat, ale, and whatever their boots stepped in earlier. You find a corner, shake out the straw as if it'll help, and lie down fully clothed. You're not trusting your boots or purse to the floor. Mainstream fact. Taverns often doubled as overnight stops for travelers too poor for a private inn. Lodgers shared open spaces, and fleas were as guaranteed as the roof overhead. Quirky tidbit. Some people carried sprigs of mint or lavender in their clothes, hopping to repel the little biters, though it probably only gave the fleas something pleasantly scented to crawl through. Historians still argue whether these shared sleeping lofts fostered friendly camaraderie or just miserable outbreaks of lice. The room creaks with every shift of weight. Someone mutters in their sleep, someone else coughs like a dying chimney, and a dog curled by the stairs growls at invisible enemies. You close your eyes, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on your neck. Is it straw or not? You tell yourself the itching is just your imagination, but you keep your purse under your head anyway. In this place, you're sleeping among strangers, and you're all equal in the eyes of the fleas. Alewives and accusations. The woman pouring your drink might be the heart of the village, or on trial tomorrow. Morning drags itself into the tavern like a reluctant guest. The loft smells of smoke, sweat, and straw that hasn't been changed since the last century, or at least it feels that way. You climb down the ladder, boots in hand, only to nearly collide with the alewife herself, already up and wiping tankards with the same rag you swear you saw last night. She's a sturdy woman, sleeves rolled high, and she moves with the brisk authority of someone who's had to throw more than one drunk out by the ear. Alewives ran many taverns in their husband's absence, or simply because they were better at the job. But it wasn't always admired work. Women who sold ale were easy targets for gossip, accused of watering down drinks, overcharging patrons, or, if someone wanted them gone, dabbling in witchcraft. Mainstream fact. Records show alewives were repeatedly fined for serving short measures or ignoring brewing regulations. Quirky tidbit. Medieval towns sometimes marked their doors with an ale stake, a wooden pole or broom, so customers knew when fresh ale was ready. Historians still argue whether the witchy reputation of alewives came from real fear of poisoning or just resentment of women earning their own coin. She eyes you not unkindly but sharply, like someone who knows every secret in a 10-mile radius. Behind her, a patron mutters that yesterday's ale tasted thin as holy water, and she fires back. Then maybe pray over it. The room laughs, but you catch a flash of irritation. You thank her for breakfast, a crust and a lukewarm mug, while keeping your head low. You don't need to be part of any village feud about whether the alewife's mug is honest. Here, the line between respected hostess and whispered accusation is as narrow as the rim of your cup. Monks and moralizing. A robed guest warns of sin while sneaking a second mug. The soldier's boots have barely clattered off down the street when the door opens again, this time for a monk. His robe is travel-stained, his sandals muddy, but his tonsured head shines like a candle in the dim light. He blesses the room with 2 fingers and immediately asks for ale. A few patrons chuckle. Clearly this isn't his first visit. He settles at a table near you and launches into a sermon, half warning, half performance. Drink in moderation, avoid sin, beware the devil hiding behind every jug. Then he raises his mug and drains it like a man who's found no demons at the bottom, at least not yet. The tavern listens politely, partly because monks were respected, partly because nobody wants trouble with the church, even if the church seems to enjoy its ale as much as any plowman. Mainstream fact: monks often traveled between abbeys on church business, and taverns offered shelter along the road. Quirky tidbit: some monasteries even brewed their own ale so strong it made local tavern drinks taste like river water. Historians still argue whether monks genuinely disapproved of tavern revelry or simply wanted to keep the brewing profits for themselves. The monk blesses a carter's mule, warns a shepherd that gambling leads straight to damnation, and then quietly asks the innkeeper for another cup. His words are honeyed, but his eyes are sharp, weighing who might need guidance, or who might have coins to spare for alms. He turns to you, asks where you're headed, and reminds you that the road is full of sin and danger. You nod, sip politely, and wonder whether his warning is heartfelt or just another kind of tavern performance. In this room, everyone plays a role. Some pray, some preach, some just pour. You're starting to see they're not as different as they seem. Monks and moralizing. A robed guest warns of sin while sneaking a second mug. The soldier's boots have barely clattered off down the street when the door opens again, this time for a monk. His robe is travel-stained, his sandals muddy, but his tonsured head shines like a candle in the dim light. He blesses the room with 2 fingers and immediately asks for ale. A few patrons chuckle. Clearly this isn't his first visit. He settles at a table near you and launches into a sermon, half warning, half performance. Drink in moderation, avoid sin, beware the devil hiding behind every jug. Then he raises his mug and drains it like a man who's found no demons at the bottom, at least not yet. The tavern listens politely, partly because monks were respected, partly because nobody wants trouble with the church, even if the church seems to enjoy its ale as much as any plowman. Mainstream fact: monks often traveled between abbeys on church business, and taverns offered shelter along the road. Quirky tidbit: some monasteries even brewed their own ale so strong it made local tavern drinks taste like river water. Historians still argue whether monks genuinely disapproved of tavern revelry or simply wanted to keep the brewing profits for themselves. The monk blesses a carter's mule, warns a shepherd that gambling leads straight to damnation, and then quietly asks the innkeeper for another cup. His words are honeyed, but his eyes are sharp, weighing who might need guidance, or who might have coins to spare for alms. He turns to you, asks where you're headed, and reminds you that the road is full of sin and danger. You nod, sip politely, and wonder whether his warning is heartfelt or just another kind of tavern performance. In this room, everyone plays a role. Some pray, some preach, some just pour. You're starting to see they're not as different as they seem. Closing time, medieval style. Instead of last call, the innkeeper simply dumps a bucket on the fire. The monk's voice fades as the night thickens, and the tavern drifts into a drowsy hum. Candles sputter in pools of wax, the hearth burns low, and mugs are emptied rather than refilled. There's no polite bell for last call here, just the innkeeper banging a bucket on the floor and muttering about closing. Then, with deliberate ceremony, he douses the fire. Smoke coils upward like a ghost reluctantly leaving its haunt, and the sudden darkness feels like a command. Time to go. Patrons shuffle out or slump over tables, claiming they'll leave in just a moment, though everyone knows they'll wake up with straw in their hair. A man by the door complains loudly about still being thirsty. The innkeeper points to the bucket and says, "Drink that." Laughter ripples through the room, though no one doubts he'd toss it on them next if they linger. Mainstream fact: medieval taverns often closed simply by extinguishing the central hearth. No heat, no light, no reason to stay. Quirky tidbit: some towns passed curfews requiring taverns to shut early, but many landlords ignored them until a guard personally showed up. Historians still argue whether these early closing times protected public order or just gave constables first crack at the best ale. The last scraps of food vanish, benches scrape back, and you notice how quickly friendly chatter turns to guarded silence once business ends. The room empties like a tide going out, leaving behind the smell of sour ale, wet wool, and smoke too thick to breathe. The innkeeper bars the door with a plank, his eyes sweeping the room for stragglers. You raise your head, purse still under it, and he gives a nod. Not warm, not cold, just a silent agreement. Stay quiet, sleep safe, and be gone early. In a tavern like this, closing time isn't about sending you home. It's about reminding you this was never really home. Sneaking out back, you tiptoe past sleeping dogs and drunken snores to avoid a tavern brawl. The tavern has gone silent except for a few heavy snores and the occasional shuffle of boots against the floor. You wake before dawn, ears tuned to the creak of timbers and the soft growl of the innkeeper's dog downstairs. Time to slip out before the room stirs, and before anyone remembers you might still have coins worth taking. You move carefully, easing past slumped forms on the pallets. A farmer twitches in his sleep, dreaming of sheep or maybe losing dice. Near the stairs, a man has dozed off upright against the wall, mug still in hand. You hold your breath as you pass him. The latter complains under your weight, each step a groan louder than a confession. Mainstream fact: many taverns had rear exits for practical reasons, bringing in barrels or letting out drunks without disturbing front door trade. Quirky tidbit: some travelers swore by these hidden ways out, claiming they avoided not only brawls but also the watchmen patrolling for curfew violators. Historians still argue whether these exits were a safety feature or simply an escape route for people avoiding debts, both fiscal and personal. At the bottom, you find the back door unbarred. Maybe the innkeeper trusts his dog more than his patrons. You step into the chill night air, boots muffled by packed dirt. The moon hangs low, throwing silver light on the alley where barrels lean like sleepy sentries. You tighten your cloak and pull the hood low, not just against the cold but against curious eyes that might appear at the wrong moment. A distant shout echoes down the street. Maybe a watchman, maybe just someone arguing with the darkness. You slip away quietly, past the pile of refuse you hope is just turnip peelings. Behind you, the tavern remains still, its windows dark. You're grateful for the roof and the stew, but even more grateful to leave without testing whether the morning crowd would still smile once they notice you gone. Moonlit streets, empty purse, outside again. You weigh whether your ribs or your pride hurts more. The street is nearly empty, washed pale by the moon. A few shuttered houses lean over the cobblestones as if gossiping about you while you pass. Your purse feels lighter than it did yesterday, not because anyone stole from you, though that was certainly possible, but because taverns have a way of drinking your coins even faster than your throat does. You tug it closed tight anyway, just in case. Your ribs ache from the straw pallet, and your head buzzes faintly from the thin ale. Somewhere in the distance, a cock crows far too early, either confused or determined to ruin your morning before it begins. You step around puddles reflecting the moonlight, though some of them smell suspiciously like things no moon should touch. Mainstream fact: medieval streets at night were rarely patrolled except in large towns, leaving travelers to their own caution. Quirky tidbit: some people carried night charms or amulets against thieves and spirits, though it's hard to say which threat worried them more. Historians still argue whether fear of the dark kept crime low or whether crime simply went unreported because everyone stayed indoors. A stray dog trots past with something in its mouth that might once have been bread or someone's missing shoe. You hug your cloak tighter, counting your remaining coins. The tavern's roof kept the rain off your back, but the price was more than money. You're hungry again, tired still, and you can't help wondering whether the bread was harder on your teeth or your pride. You glance over your shoulder one last time. The tavern sits dark and silent, giving away no secrets of last night's laughter, muttering, or dice rolls. By dawn, its benches will be scrubbed, the floor swept with something rougher than straw, and the door propped open for the next weary traveler. You'll just be another shadow that passed through, lighter in purse and a little heavier in caution. What historians still can't agree on. Scholars puzzle over whether taverns united communities or poisoned them. The eastern sky shows a faint smear of gray, the first hint of morning. Your feet ache as you leave the crooked lanes of town and rejoin the rutted road. The ground is damp, the air smells of wood smoke and dung, and your stomach growls loud enough to startle a blackbird from a hedge. You remember last night's pallet in the tavern corner, the stale air, the sour ale, the muttered threats in dreams. It wasn't comfort, but it was shelter, and shelter was never guaranteed. Some peasants slept in fields beneath hedges, others begged a monastery's porter for a spot by the bakehouse fire, and still others curled in a church porch, hoping no priest or watchman would chase them off. Mainstream fact: pilgrim roads and market routes often had unofficial sleeping, lofts, hayricks, or even disused carts pulled to the roadside. Quirky tidbit: some travelers carried bits of straw or rushes in their packs, not for bedding, but as tokens to pay for a spot on someone's barn floor. Historians still debate whether this was generosity, bribery, or simply rural custom. As you walk, you pass a farmhouse just waking up, its chimney coughing smoke. A woman throws washwater into the yard. A child chases geese, losing the battle as expected. You wonder if they'd have let you sleep in their hay last night for a coin or a story. But you didn't ask. You chose the tavern because it was louder, busier, safer in numbers, even if safety had its price. The road stretches ahead, winding toward another village where you'll face the same question tonight. Where will you sleep? Under a roof if luck and coins hold out. Under the stars if not. You adjust your bundle, feel the last clink of your purse, and keep walking. You're just one more dusty traveler among countless forgotten feet that wore this road thin, each step a story, each night a gamble, and each dawn proof that you've made it through.